LA's most prominent music and community figures is now facing serious criminal charges.
That's right. Federal authorities say Eugene "Big U" Henley led a violent criminal enterprise responsible for murder, extortion, and fraud.
Eugene "Big U" Henley, the leader of the notorious Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips in Los Angeles, cultivated a public persona as a respectable businessman, community leader, and gang prevention activist. But his true nature was far more sinister. He was embezzling public funds intended for at-risk black youth to support his illegal enterprise.
Received millions from LA's Gang Reduction and Youth Development Program.
He used that goodwill to benefit himself. He diverted money from that charity and lined his own pockets with it, and that money was ultimately traced, and that we can show that he used it for personal purposes.
Additionally, he is charged with killing a 21-year-old budding rapper by shooting him in the head, pulling his body off the road, and abandoning him in a desert ditch.
A diss track about Henley. Prosecutors claim Henley then confronted the rapper, drove him to North Las Vegas, killed him, and dumped his body in a ditch back in January 2021.
And all of this occurred while he was getting millions of dollars in support from the US government. The Big U narrative is crazy, and we're going to break it all down in this video. So let's start on March 19th, 2025. 2 weeks ago, the US attorney's office in California announced a 43-count indictment against Eugene Henley, better known as Big U, a 58-year-old hip-hop music executive. The charges included fraud, extortion, and murder. After the story went viral, many people became aware of Big U's existence, but Big U's legal troubles date back far beyond this most recent indictment. To truly understand how we got here, we must go back to 1992, when Big U was already making headlines, but not for his music or activism at the age of 26. Prosecutors said Eugene Henley was sentenced to 23 years in prison for trying to rob an undercover sheriff's deputy of 33 pounds of cocaine during a sting operation. Henley and one of his associates, Eddie Wagner, thought the officer was a drug dealer who had set up the deal. However, when Henley showed up, he pulled a gun and demanded the drugs, at which point law enforcement arrived and took them both into custody. Although Henley denied ever being a member of any gang, authorities later described him as a key figure, possibly even the top leader of the Rolling 60s Crips, one of the most feared gangs in southwest Los Angeles at the time, and he was released in 2004 after serving 13 years in prison. He established Developing Options, a non-profit organization, a group based in Los Angeles that specializes in youth outreach and gang intervention. Stated in its mission statement that it wanted to provide young people with alternatives to crime and violence through advocacy, education, sports, and mentoring. The program gave South Central Los Angeles kids a safe outlet and made Henley a well-respected community leader. But Henley wasn't only focused on helping the community, he was also making moves in the music industry. Shortly after starting Developing Options, Henley started managing the career of hip-hop artist Kurupt, which allowed him to further establish himself in the entertainment industry and increase his influence. Eventually, Kurupt introduced Henley to Death Row Records and Suge Knight, who, according to Henley, helped him financially and put him in a position to succeed. It was through these industry connections that Henley met an up-and-coming rapper and fellow Rollin 60s member, the late Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey briefly resided with Henley's family and put some of his early songs on tape according to the federal complaint filed in this case. The FBI started looking into the Rolling 60s Crips in August 2020. By the following year, the focus shifted to what agents called the Big U Enterprise, a criminal operation allegedly directly tied to Eugene Henley and his long-standing influence within the Rolling 60s on wiretapped calls. This wasn't just deeply connected to the music industry, he also managed to turn his criminal past into a story of redemption by positioning himself as a respected community leader for black youth, and, it worked. The complaint alleges that Henley boasted about being larger than any member of the Rolling 60s, including Nipsey. Henley and Nipsey had a tense and unresolved relationship over the years, with some even speculating that Big U may have contributed to Nip's death, though there has never been any proof to support that theory.
brother was my equal at that time or any other time. You know what I'm saying? So he had his own little squad, and we was together, bro. We was, like I said, look at the videos.
According to official court documents that were not sealed at the time of his arrest, Eugene Henley's criminal organization, known as the Big U Enterprise, operated like a mafia-style organization between 2010 and 2024. Federal prosecutors claim that Henley intimidated individuals and businesses throughout Los Angeles by using his reputation and close ties to the Rolling 60s and other street gangs. The feds made it clear that was more than just a street gang connection, characterizing it as its own distinct and organized criminal operation, involved in serious crimes like murder, extortion, robbery, sex trafficking, fraud, and illegal gambling. Let's go over one of the most disturbing allegations against Eugene Henley, which is the murder of a young man named Rayan Williams. Ray Sean Williams, referred to as RW in official court documents, was just 21 years old, a rising star with raw talent and a former wide receiver for the Shaw High School football team. He was full of potential, someone chasing a dream and trying to make something of himself. He wasn't just another artist on Henley's radar. He was being mentored by him. Henley had coached Ray Sean in football during his younger years and later brought him under his wing musically, eventually signing him to his label, Unique Music. This wasn't, however, just business. It was personal. Henley had played a direct role in shaping Ran's path, positioning himself as a mentor for him in January 2021. Unique Music arranged for Ran to travel from California to Los Angeles. The goal was to give the young artist a dedicated week to work in a fresh environment with complete studio access and space to create. Henley's team booked him an Airbnb, and everything was lined up to help him focus on music and take the next step in his career. But what happened next turned that trip into a nightmare. 5 days prior to his death, Ray Sean Williams recorded a diss track in which he called someone the bro that makes some money and implied that he would get shot in the face for thinking in reference to a nightmare that left him dead in a ditch. It's funny since, according to federal agent Kevin Rower, he also referred to a .38 revolver with no trace. It is unclear whether Big U had actually heard the song prior to the murder, but it is certain that this young man had recorded a song in which he apparently insulted Big U, and now he was traveling to Las Vegas with full financial support from the record label owned by the same man he had just insulted, the same man who is now accused of killing him. The disc seemed to be directed at Eugene Henley, the man who mentored Ray Sean and represented him under his independent label, Unique Music. Investigators recount what transpired next in terrifying detail. Things didn't go quite as planned once in Vegas. Rayan was supposed to record 1 tune per day, but detectives said he began skipping sessions. What was supposed to be a concentrated week of invention swiftly devolved into a string of inexplicable absences, and tension is said to have started to rise in January. When Ray Sean failed to show up for yet another session on January 23, 2021, investigators claim that Bigu and his associate Robinson drove from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to confront him. According to a friend of Ray Sean, Big U arrived at the Airbnb at around 2 a.m. on that day and asked why Ran hadn't been showing up. At that point, Rachan Williams informed Big U that he didn't have a ride. Investigators claim that Henley felt that Ray Sean was wasting his time by not showing up to sessions and that he was seemingly dissing him in a song that he had recorded a few days earlier. It's clear that things could have irritated Henley. After all, Big U was known for demanding respect and wasn't afraid to use his gang ties to intimidate people and businesses, and the feds believed everything. The claimed disrespect, the lyrics, the missing studio sessions, and the stress that had built up were what ultimately led to this fatal occurrence on January 24, 2021. Around 7 p.m, Big U came to the studio, and a few hours later, Ray Sean Williams arrived. They recorded music until midnight, and everything appeared to be in order. At 12:30 a.m, Big U left the studio in the grey Lexus he had been driving with his right-hand man, Sylvester Robinson. Shortly before 1 a.m, Big U's phone stopped reporting. any location data and didn't resume until about 2:15 a.m. Around today, 1:30 a.m. on that night, surveillance footage from the Airbnb they had put Rachan in showed a dark grey or silver sedan pulling up to Rachan. Williams got out of the passenger side, went to the Airbnb, and came back with his suitcase, despite the fact that the Airbnb was still booked for another day, and his flight wasn't later until later. So the real question is, why was Ray Sean leaving the Airbnb with his suitcase even though he wasn't scheduled to leave on Veg Day? Around 3 May, the same night at Bigureta Studio, the studio but this alone. A witness later told investigators he looked like he was drenched in either water. When asked why he looked like he just jumped out of the ocean, Big U claimed that putting in some work in the morning, around 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. on January 25th, police received a call about a body found in a desert area just outside of Las Vegas, near Clar Boulevard, on Boulevard, about 4 miles northeast of Las Speedway. At the Speedway, the victim was identified as Yan Williams, a promising aspiring young rapper and a former wide receiver for the Crenshaw High School team. For the Ryan team, Ryan had been face-to-face, and investigators believed Aruse was used with a weapon that doesn't leave anything behind. At that time, investigators collected DNA from Rachel's body and compared it. The results came in inconclusive, but Henley still couldn't be ruled out as a possible match. But the DNA wasn't the only thing raising suspicion in the days that followed. According to the affidavit, investigators believe that surveillance footage would have shown an altercation between Henley and Ray Sean and possibly captured the two leaving the studio together prior to the murder. About a month after the murder, the FBI's LA Metropolitan Task Force on Violent Gangs launched a full-scale investigation into the Big U enterprise and its ties to the Rollin 60s Crips. However, the murder of Ran Williams is not the only serious allegation connected to Eugene Henley. Federal prosecutors also claim that Henley used Development Options, the very non-profit that enhances his reputation. Henley filed a false CO9 relief application, claiming that his record label, Unique Music, had made $200,000 in 2019. But in fact, it had reported a $5,000 loss and was not qualified for funding. In addition, Development Options received more than $2.3 million in public funding through the gang between 2018 and 2023. Reduction and Youth Development Program. Under the LA Mayor's Office, prosecutors allege Henley diverted portions of those public funds, along with more than $40,000 in private donations from NBA players, into his personal accounts. And aside from the COVID-19 relief scam, Henley was also defrauding companies, donors, and even celebrities. According to prosecutors, he convinced some notable people like NBA star Draymond Green and Lakers legend Shaquille O'Neal to donate to his nonprofit, and then quietly funneled that money into his own personal bank accounts. Like, how exactly do you think that you're going to get away with siphoning money from your so-called nonprofit that's literally funded by the government and think that it's not going to get noticed? That's crazy. And it wasn't just Big U who got. Aside from the 10 Rollin 60s arrested, a few of his associates were hit with charges too for some pretty wildly. If one of them, Armani Alege, was charged with transporting someone for prostitution, and another person. According to the US Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, Timaine Williams, also known as Loose Cannon, was charged with robbery, and Frederick Blandon Jr. was also charged with bank fraud. Both of them are presently being held. Big U is accused of leading a full-fledged criminal operation, and the crazy part of it all is that he was allegedly doing all of this while operating a non-profit organization that purported to combat gang violence. He was also allegedly using government funds to support anti-gang initiatives while continuing to engage in the very lifestyle he claimed to be opposing. If you're a California taxpayer, you know where your money has been going, and I'd be furious too. What makes his Big U story so wild is how he managed to flip his past in the streets into a redemption narrative and actually managed to secure government funding off of that. For something like this to happen, you don't just need a clean image, you need serious connections, and that's something Big U clearly had. I'm just confused how his non-profit managed to, stay under the radar for so long. Like, How was he able to like take money and like get all this money and run it up for like years without getting caught? But from another perspective, the feds actually, started looking into this back in 2021. And that's when they realized that, something wasn't adding up. And if you know how the feds move out here, right? They don't always hit you right away. They let you run up the tab, you know what I'm saying, and dash a few times here and there. And then on that 7th time when you're ready to, sneak out the back, boom, right, they just hit you in the face. And they got a bunch of receipts, all play-by-play of everything you've done. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an informant or two involved in this case, especially with how many people were tied to it. When you've got a crew that big, someone's always talking, whether it was to save themselves or cut a deal. I'm sure someone gave the feds exactly what they needed to build this case from the inside. If you made it this far, drop a like on this video. If you're new here, my name is Blackie Speaks to meet you, and I appreciate you subscribing. That's the Eugene Big U Henley story, and I must say that it's pretty crazy. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. Alright, I'll see you in the comments section below, but more importantly, I'll see you in the next video. Peace be with you.